You know how everyone's been saying that Marvel's kind of fallen off? The quality of its shows and even its movies has just been dwindling to a point where it's not really exciting to see them anymore and they're kind of stinky. Whoo-wee! Wait until you see the Marvels. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I mean this with no exaggeration. The Marvels is the MCU's messiest movie to date, and it's not even close. I actually can't even believe the movie released in its current state. It almost feels like this is internal sabotage from someone on the inside trying to sink the MCU and make it go even lower, because it's like nobody even bothered to watch what they were putting out there. I really thought Ant-Man Quantumania would probably be the worst modern Marvel movie we'd ever get. How wrong I was. It's like they took every single criticism that's ever been thrown against the MCU and said, "Oh, you thought that was bad, watch this," and then did all of it 10 times worse. It feels as though they shot 4 different films and then took some elements from each one, haphazardly threw them all together into this witch's cauldron here, bubbling over into this fucking potion that induces a headache in all of the spectators. This movie is fundamentally like 4 action sequences that are loosely strung together with the worst narrative the MCU's ever had, because it doesn't even try to develop the characters or their relationships. I'm gonna go ahead and get my only compliment about this movie out of the way right now. I've never seen the Miss Marvel show, so this movie was my introduction to Miss Marvel, and she is great. Both the actress playing Miss Marvel and even the character I think has so much potential in the universe. She is the only good thing about this movie. She fucking kills it. Miss Marvel is the only thing this movie does well, but it's not nearly enough to save it or even make this worth watching. It doesn't redeem the 150 minutes that get flushed down the shitter. So let's go ahead and dive in. The biggest mistake this movie makes is with its villain. The most forgettable villain in MCU history, the most underdeveloped villain in MCU history. I don't know how we're in 2023 with like fucking 15 years worth of MCU movies, and a big criticism was underdeveloped villains in some of the movies, and somehow this deep into the game, phase fucking 5 here, they deliver the worst villain they've ever had. I can't even remember her name. I have to keep looking it up and then I still forget it. That's how forgettable she is. I think her name is Danber. I looked it up again. Darbin. Her name is Darbin. Fundamentally, she is like Ronin if Ronin was written in 5 minutes. Like, all she does is she creates some portals that suck things up occasionally. And that's it. Spoilers, I'll tell you her motivation, and it's only explained in a couple of lines of dialogue. Instead of showing you, they just tell you. It really does feel like a lot of this was AI generated at the last possible second. I'm just gonna fucking say it. Basically, Captain Marvel made a decision that had a huge effect on the Kree and caused a lot of problems for them. Darbin, being one of the Kree, will do anything to try and save them. She hates Captain Marvel and thus wants to take things from her in order to help save the Kree, basically. And since this is only explained in a few lines of dialogue that feel almost like throwaway lines, there's no actual emotional investment here. Since they don't bother to flesh out Darbin at all, she becomes kind of like this villain caricature, this cartoonishly evil presence that's evil for the sake of being nasty. And even when Darbin and Captain Marvel are on screen together, there's still no emotional weight to anything that happens because they're speed running through shit and barely even attempting to make something cohesive. But she's not really a big threat, because they make it clear early on that the only reason she's not defeated easily by Captain Marvel is because the big gimmick of the movie keeps happening where they switch places when they use their powers. So Miss Marvel even says, like, I know you could absolutely just fucking clobber her if we would stop switching places, and I'm sorry about that. And she's right, because the main villain isn't very strong. And in fact, every time they meet her, they pretty much do defeat her until she just miraculously pulls out like a big force blast that opens up that portal at the last possible second. But even aside from just the super weak villain, this movie is tonally all over the place. The vast majority of the film doesn't take itself seriously. It's mainly like a Thor Love and Thunder fucking flat comedy where almost none of the jokes are landing. The worst offender is actually Nick Fury. Nick Fury has a prominent role here, but he's just literally a clown. I don't think he has a single line of dialogue in this movie that isn't a joke or leading into a punchline. Even when the stakes are super high, like, oh, we might, lose the world here if Darbin's plan goes correctly. And even when he's about to fucking die, he's making jokes the entire time. What happened to this character? It's not even consistent with the Nick Fury that we know, or the one that was in Secret Invasion, which I didn't finish because I didn't really like it that much. But this is not the same character. They replaced him with a goofball. Like I don't understand what even happened here. Almost every single scene outside of action is all over the place. It wants to be like this wacky, quirky, zany comedy, and then sometimes it wants to be like a drama, and then sometimes it wants to be more action-focused. It's at its best when it's doing action. I think some of the action scenes are pretty decent, though there are moments here where you can really feel the tears from the CGI artists that have to work on this. They are just overworked. The VFX department at Marvel, I can feel their pain through some of these scenes because a lot of them feel as though they didn't have time to actually finish it. I don't hold it against them. It's just the Marvel pipeline where they're constantly just fucking pumping shit out as quickly as possible without a care in the world. But there are some action sequences that look alarmingly rough in the CGI department. But for the most part, the action is pretty okay. It's pretty fun, especially the final fight is interesting, I guess. But it doesn't really matter that much because there's not a real movie around it. You're basically just watching a montage of some decent action moments, and that's it. So anyway, back to what I was saying. In between these action sequences, when it's trying to do a bunch of different things, it fails on all fronts. Let me give you an example. So there's a planet they visit, and it's a planet that means a lot to Captain Marvel. And the inhabitants of that world only communicate through song. If you just speak, they can't understand you. It basically has to be a musical. And I think it is the most insufferable sequence or series of scenes the MCU's ever had. It just doesn't make any sense. If this was a Rick and Morty sketch, fine. This feels like it fit right at home in some kind of Saturday morning cartoon special as a joke. But this comes in the middle of the film where things are getting desperate, where the villain's succeeding and this is a planet Captain Marvel really cares about, and it's about to get fucked in the ass. And it's okay, why are we having a musical here about this and not taking anything seriously? And even when they fail to protect it, 10 seconds later, Captain Marvel's joking. This is a place she called home 5 minutes ago. She fucking fails to protect it from Darbin, and she immediately just starts joking about it. And then the next scene, pretty much, they go into this whole cat subplot. This whole side quest with cats, and Nick Fury, and cats. It's all over the place. You can't take it seriously if the movie itself doesn't take it seriously and isn't actually held together by anything at all. There's no real substance here. The only time this movie even comes close to making an emotional beat work is between Captain Marvel and Monica Rambeau. They have a relationship that is loosely explored and only one time successfully gets across the weight of it. And that's through this sequence where they're seeing each other's memories. They all kind of tap into this thing that's showing memories, and they do a good job of setting up Captain Marvel and Monica there. But outside of that, anytime they try and explore that, they don't give it any real chance. It just falls flat again. They have one good emotional scene with that, and then completely forgot how to do it appropriately because they were too busy focusing on lame humor. And going into the film, I imagine a lot of you think that the switching of places is going to be integral to the plot. It's really not. It's used occasionally, but it doesn't even follow its own rules for the switching sometimes. They forget to switch. It's supposed to be when they, use their powers at the same time they switch, but there's multiple scenes where they both, or all three of them really, will use their powers at pretty much the same time and not switch. It's like they forgot that gimmick was even present sometimes. And it doesn't really play a role in the narrative outside of explaining why Darbin just can't be easily defeated by Captain Marvel. So while I think the concept could have been fun to explore, these three characters need to work together in order to overcome an overwhelmingly powerful enemy and somehow use this to their advantage, the ability to switch places. Somehow they take that and just make it we'll utilize it sometimes, but it doesn't really matter. And even at the end of the movie, they just kind of throw it away. They just wipe their ass with it. They just say oh, we're not entangled anymore. It's oh, okay. Well, okay then. I guess so. It's like, come on. Like, I don't know what went wrong here. In its current state, the movie only works if you want to go and just watch some mindless action and then not listen to any of the dialogue or the story. Like, that's probably the only way you can get any amount of enjoyment out of it. Because like I said, some of the action is pretty good, but like, that doesn't make a movie. You still need more than that. And it's not like the action is anything new to the MCU. It's all still very generic for the most part. There's nothing new here, aside from new lows that it reached with how little it actually cared. And now I have no idea what they're even going to do with these characters going forward, because this movie did nothing to progress any of them except Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel, like I said, is the only component of this film that works at all. She is the only good part of this movie. Monica, I think, could have been great here. I think WandaVision was building up to Monica being a very strong and interesting character, but this movie just ruined it. They didn't let her do anything until the very end. I won't spoil that, but at the very end she becomes the most important character pretty much out of nowhere, because up until then, she didn't get to do anything. Like, they didn't develop her or even try, and it's such a shame. And I don't know what the fuck they're going to do with Nick Fury going forward. Maybe they'll try and explain away his behavior here as him being some kind of variant from an alternate universe or something that got fucking slapped into this movie. Because I don't know what the fuck their plan is. They turned him into comic relief, purely just comic relief and nothing else, which is such a wild decision. Anyway, plugging the Marvels into the moist meter, I'm going to have to give it like a 25%. It is the messiest MCU movie that has been made. I think I can comfortably say that. Just, I'm still shocked that it released in this current state that it's in. That's really about it. It's not looking great for the MCU going forward here. I don't know how they bounce back. I don't know what direction they even take the MCU anymore. But I guess we'll just have to see. That's it. See ya. Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're checking out Space Jam: A New Legacy. I haven't seen the original Space Jam since probably the 90s. It's been a long time for me, but I loved the movie when I was younger. I can't imagine I'd go back and watch it now and enjoy it as much today as I did back then. I think that movie was really a product of its time. It took all of the 90s and fucking flavor blasted it into this goldfish of a movie, which ended up just happening to work with Space Jam. Like, it was a fun movie for its time, but I don't want to go back and take the risk that it actually sucks ass by today's standards, because I have a sneaking suspicion that it's probably not that great anymore, and I just don't want to risk it. I want to keep those cherished childhood memories intact and not ruin it. But I will say, Space Jam: A New Legacy fucking sucks. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. This is going to be like a Moist Meter speedrun. This is the laziest movie I think I've ever seen. There is no effort put into the creation of this film at all. The movie is entirely references, and I'm sure you've heard that on Twitter by now, and maybe even seen some of the clips where it is just reference at every single step of this movie. It's completely devoid of all substance and creativity. It really just feels like they wanted to make a couple bucks off the beloved Space Jam property, but it doesn't have any of the magic of Space Jam. It's like they actually took the basketball from Space Jam and just sucked all of the talent and creativity out of the fucking studio here and then produced this hemorrhoid. I understand this is a movie made for kids, but that doesn't mean that it has to blow asshole. You know what else was a movie made for kids? Paddington 2, and that shit fucking slapped. You know who's not in this movie? Paddington. Huge mistake. Paddington should have been on the Looney Tunes team for some reason. Just any reason to put Paddington out there. I would love to see it. What I'm saying is, just because a movie's made for kids doesn't mean that it has to fucking suck. It's also an insultingly long, miserable experience. It's like a 2-hour movie for no reason. Like, within the first hour, you get to the basketball game, which I would have expected to last maybe like 30 minutes or something, but it lasts another fucking hour. So you have an hour of just this boring build-up of... build-up's the wrong word, because there is no fucking build-up, it's just references. Like, in one scene, you're watching an Austin Powers clip that has a Looney Tune in it, and then in the next scene, you're watching a black and white television show that has a Looney Tune in it, and you just keep going back and forth, rapid fire, never letting you breathe. But when you get to the basketball game, then you're fucking strapped in, locked in, loaded for an hour of boring nonsense. Like, I can't even remember half of the shit that happened there. I sat there and watched the whole thing with a frown on my face, and I cannot even tell you half of the shit that goes on. There's like 10 different times LeBron's like, fundamentals, but maybe we should get goofy because it's not working with fundamentals. And it's like, oh, the fundamentals are going to work again. But what if we got goofy? Or maybe the movie was skipping back and forth and replaying the same part multiple times. I couldn't tell you. I honestly don't know. After a certain point in that basketball game, I just felt like I was being hypnotized. It's not good. I can't even imagine for kids they'd find a whole lot of things to like about it, because half the references aren't even going to make sense to them. What fucking child has seen Austin Powers, right? It's just kind of a dog-ass movie all around, no matter what your age. And I don't think LeBron made the movie weaker or anything like that. I thought LeBron did fine. He is on screen 99% of the time here, and I found that to be okay. It's not like he was insufferable to watch. He's not like a super shitty actor. He's not good by any means, but it's like charmingly mediocre. Like, you can tell that he wants to do well. Like, when he's doing the voice acting for his cartoon counterpart, you can hear him kind of changing his voice a little bit, doing screams. So you can see that there's effort there on his part, but he's just not talented at acting enough to make it good. And I don't know, there's something about that dichotomy of like this effort and lack of talent, and it kind of worked for me. I don't know. It just made it really believable. It's like, yeah, that is actually fucking LeBron doing this. You know, I thought that was fine. Like, I didn't have any problems with LeBron as the main character and like the only character that's on screen every single scene in the movie. I think the movie could have been better, at least if they had just focused on doing more than just making as many references as they could possibly fist into this movie. Like, the idea of having LeBron's son being kidnapped by a video game AI that forces him to play a crazy game of basketball is at least a fun idea. But the fun is taken out of it when there's like no effort put into making it actually fun to watch. It's also way too long. It is way, way too long. Plugging this into the moist meter, I'm giving Space Jam: A New Legacy a 25%. I don't know who would go into this movie and feel satisfied. I mean, being able to point out some references, being like, oh, I get that, I guess could be fun for some people, but when you're saying that 90 times over the course of 25 minutes, I think it's going to lose its luster and stop being that fun. So that's about it. So yeah.
Initiating moisture.
Morbius is absolutely miserable. I can completely confirm that everything you've heard about it is absolutely true, and it's even worse than you're probably thinking it is. It's not so bad that it's entertaining like I expected it to be. It is mind-numbingly boring. It was agonizing. I was in a constant struggle to stay awake for the movie. I cannot believe that they even bothered to release this. They should have just scrapped it and said it got stolen in a burglary or something. It should not have gone to theaters. When watching Morbius, I felt like I time traveled back to 2004 when almost every superhero movie was trash, like Elektra and all that. That's what this movie felt like. I feel like at some point along the way there was an idea for Morbius, and then they overdosed on Xanax and then produced this. It is, in all aspects, lackluster. Top to bottom. There is almost nothing redeeming about this movie. But Jared Leto made history. Not with like a great performance here or anything, but he now has one of the worst DC movies ever made with Suicide Squad 2016, and now one of the worst Marvel-based movies ever made with Morbius. This is crazy how hard this one missed the mark. So let's just go ahead and get started talking about the movie. Let's get after it. Let's get a little stinky in the cesspool. The story, it's trash. It's the most predictable superhero plot I think I've heard since the creation of the MCU. There is no attempt here to make a compelling narrative whatsoever. Everything you think is going to happen in this movie happens. If you watch the trailer to this movie, you probably already know everything that's going to happen in this movie with the characters. It's just a complete throwaway. There was no effort there whatsoever. It's like they had an AI write this plot after the AI sat down to watch 3 superhero films from the late 90s. It didn't try, didn't bother. So, not a whole lot to say there, just wasteful. I will say, though, that this movie feels like it was supposed to be completely different than what we got. It feels like all of the editing really betrayed it. Not that I think there's some Snyder cut version out there that's going to somehow save this absolute abominable septic tank explosion. But it definitely feels like it was changed drastically from the editing with a lot of shit removed. Because it moves so quickly all the time when it comes to exposition. It gives you so much info in the fastest time possible with this absolutely ballistic speed run of vomit of information. And then things will just happen for no reason. Like, things will just happen with nothing that really got you there or made you care about it. There's not a single character in this movie that you will give a fuck about. The characters don't seem to give a shit about themselves either. Like, one of the main detectives, every time he's on screen, he's like, oh my god, more dead bodies. Oh my god, dead cops in my city? Not now. Why would he do that? And then at the very end of the movie, I'm gonna try and avoid spoilers, but this movie fucking sucks. I'll give you a spoiler warning if I get into it. This might be a minor spoiler. In the movie, there's a bunch of bats that fly out of the ground, and the cops are looking down, and they're like, oh, bats. Except for one of the cops, like the main one. The bats are going up, and he just looks at him angry. He's like, He just stares him down. He's like, And that's it. Like, none of the characters have any variety of emotions to them. They're all just like fucking robots. Except for Jared Leto, admittedly, he kind of tries as Morbius. There's times where he like gives an attempt at acting. Like, he wasn't horrible in the role. It's just everything about it was bad in general, but it's not because his acting was super turbo shitty or anything. It's just they didn't try anywhere in this film. So yeah, again, I think a lot of what's going to be really confusing to people is because of the editing, where things are happening for no reason, or things are happening like off screen, it feels like, that you just have to accept. It's just bad. Everything about the story, as well as the way that it's edited, is terrible. Absolutely terrible. And let's get to the most offensive part about this movie, is the fighting. The fighting is so disorienting. Anytime there's a fight, it's obviously all CGI, but they do it in a way that obstructs your view entirely. So when Morbius is fighting someone, it's just like a bunch of like smoke and tendrils and like shit flying off of him, a bunch of like really dark particles that obstruct your view. So half the time you don't even know what he did. And when he's fighting the villain, who is horrible, the villain is absolutely nonsensically trash. When those two collide, it's like action figures being blasted together in pure pitch black. Like, you can hear things happening, but you can't see it, because both of them have just a bunch of like dark debris flying off of them, so you can't tell what is actually going on screen in a fight. It is disorienting and just genuinely confusing in all aspects. So you're praying that you don't have to see a fight because it just hurts your eyes. It's just bad. Like, it's bad CGI. It's bad everything. Literally everything is not good. I don't know why they even bothered to release the film. They should have just got rid of it. Like, just have some shame. Be like, you know what? This is a net loss, but at least we can save our reputations going further. It just wasn't worth it. I do think this movie was supposed to be R-rated, because in some of the scenes, like when Morbius slashes someone, or what I assume is a slash, because what he does is he like cranks his hand for a slap, and then fucking 1,000 pieces of debris and pixels fly off of him, and you're supposed to, connect the dots that he just slapped or slashed the guy. And then you'll hear a bunch of blood sound effects, like as if their throat just got slashed, but none of it's on screen. There's no like blood on screen or anything, so you're never really sure, but I'm assuming there was supposed to be blood and gore. And there are times where there is like some blood here and there, so you get like the general idea, but I have the feeling, based on the sound effects and the way that it's presented, it was supposed to be a lot more violent and show a lot more blood. But in an effort to keep it PG-13, they decided against it last minute, but they didn't change anything about the scenes, so it's all just a mess. Morbius is horrible. The movie's really, really bad. If I had to fish for one compliment, I would say at least it's not long. Like, at the very least, the movie's short, and the theater is probably empty. My showing had like 8 people in there, and I didn't even see them when I walked in, so they might have just decided not to go last minute, which is probably the right call to make. That's really like the only 2 things I can find to even say almost nice things about. And then there is one cop, like the cop's partner, who has a lot of speaking roles, and I didn't mind him. It looks like he put a lot of effort into his acting. I'm not sure what the actor's name is, or even what the character's name was in the movie. But there was a scene where he like brought holy water to the investigation, and he was charismatic. I liked him. But yeah, that's about it. Plugging Morbius into the moist meter, I'm giving it a 15%. Even that feels a little high, because it's not entertainingly bad, it's really boring bad. Now I feel like I have to justify why I gave it a 15% and not lower, and I think it's because I like some of the ideas. I think Morbius could have been a cool movie conceptually, but this one was just executed so poorly. There's a couple of things in the film, and again, I'm not trying to get too deep into spoilers, that I think could have worked really well if it wasn't this movie that tried them. So I do like a couple of things that it wanted to do, it just didn't do them well. But anyway, that's about it. See ya.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Jurassic World Dominion. This is the newest Jurassic World movie, and it's the worst one. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, not pulling punches, I'm just going to feed you the vegetables raw here. This is definitely their weakest movie so far. Which is upsetting because I did go into this movie with high expectations due to the director getting me hype. Before this released, the director stated that he wanted the new dinosaur, the Giganotosaurus, to be like the Joker. Whatever the fuck that means. But that piqued my interest. They're going to make a dinosaur Joker. So I half expected the dinosaur in this movie to have like face paint and a coat on. And do like a classic Joker laugh or something. But I'm disappointed to say, he's nothing like the Joker. He doesn't critique society. He doesn't do any silly dances. Nothing. So I don't understand that comparison. So I was really let down, honestly. But aside from the false advertising with Dino Joker, the rest of the movie is also bad, and I think will let down pretty much any fan of Jurassic Park or Jurassic World. I was one of the few people that didn't hate Fallen Kingdom significantly. I didn't think it was great, but it was just some cheesy, enjoyable fun. This one doesn't even have that effect. I will get all of my compliments out of the way for this movie right now. Visually, I think it's one of the strongest ones. I think they actually crushed it visually, and there's some really cool action scenes. There's like a long sequence of some dinosaurs chasing Chris Pratt on a motorcycle. Well, like the dinosaurs aren't driving the motorcycle, though that would also be fucking incredible. Chris Pratt is riding a motorcycle, avoiding the dinosaurs, and it's just pure carnage and chaos, and it's really well done and super well shot. And there's also, without getting into spoilers, there's also a couple other really good action sequences in the film, and some really cool shots. But aside from like decent action moments, everything else is pretty bad. And it really does feel like this is two different movies that they just somehow fusion danced into one. But they fucked up the fusion dance and resulted in this abomination. It's telling two different stories, two different ways. One of the stories results in at least cool action, and the other one results in head-scratching silliness. But it is cool to see the band back together for the Jurassic Park nostalgia. I just wish that their plot line was a little more interesting and a little less dumb. But it's serviceable, like, it's fine. They get them to the spot they want them to be in, which is the epicenter of all the dinosaurs and all that. So it's serviceable, it works. I do think the other plot line, which runs adjacent to this one, but they do eventually converge, the plot line with Chris Pratt and Claire, like, that one's fine. There's nothing, like, glaringly wrong with it. But I will say, it feels like Chris Pratt just didn't really want to be here. He just did it for a paycheck. His performance isn't bad or anything, but I really get the impression he was like, hey guys, can we just bang out my scenes in like an hour today? And just kind of speed run through it. Again, it's not like bad or anything, but it just truly felt like kind of deflated. Like there wasn't a whole lot of enthusiasm coming from his side, which is fine because the movie's not great, and I'm sure he recognized that the material's a bit weak. The best part of this movie is, of course, the visuals. Like I mentioned, there are really cool dinosaur sequences and dinosaur shots, but everything else isn't good. I want to give you just an example of the goofiness, and this is going to be a light spoiler, so just a spoiler warning here. The dinosaurs go a bit wild, you know? The Giganotosaurus starts attacking, squares off with the T-Rex, squares off with Freddy Krueger dinosaur. I don't even know what the fuck it is, but it has like these giant claws and it slaps with them and shit, and then they tag team on it. And it's really cool. But anyway, point is, the whole movie sets up like dinosaurs and humans just can't live together. They're destroying everything. Dinosaurs are killing people constantly. The entire first act of the movie pretty much shows that dinosaurs and humans are not really working out. You know, they're beating our ass. But then, by the end of the movie, without anything changing in like the grand scope of the world, like outside of the biosyn area, nothing changes. But all of a sudden, the dinosaurs and humans seem to be getting along. And the dinosaurs are assimilating into our ecosystem just fine. You know, they roam with elephants. They fly with ducks. There's even a little girl feeding a small raptor or something at the end. But how? Why? How did we get there? Nothing changed. You know, there was like some fighting at Biosyn, but it's not like that somehow it was like a hive mind that reprogrammed all the dinosaurs in the world to be nice to humans all of a sudden. Like how the fuck? It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. It's silly. Light spoiler over. Yeah, so overall, I just definitely think this one's the weakest by a good margin. I think whoever was doing the action sequences killed it. Whoever did everything that wasn't action, fucked it. So, plugging Jurassic World Dominion into the moist meter, I'm going to give it a 40%. I think that's pretty fair, all things considered. There's a lot of dinosaur action, which helps make up for how boring and how not great everything else is. But I don't think it's enough to carry it to being like a good or great movie, and certainly not a fitting finale to the new trilogy here. So yeah, anyway, that's about it. So yeah, taking a look at the new Shazam movie, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I mean, it's not great. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not very good. I don't know what to tell you. It really feels like DC's serving up Naruto filler for movies at the moment. This whole film felt so utterly worthless. I can't even like fully explain it without getting into spoilers, so I'm not going to, because I try and avoid spoilers to the best of my ability. But it feels like the stakes are super duper low, and it goes into the most cliche superhero film I may have ever seen. This feels like Marvel's first attempt at superhero films back in like early 2000s, but somehow this came out this year. Everything we've learned from superhero films over the last fucking 2 decades is thrown out the window for this one, and it falls back on the most generic shit ever. The villains are beyond bland and forgettable. They literally come out of nowhere, and it's like, we're mad. We're gods, and you've made us mad because of this wizard that did this, and we're mad, so we're gonna destroy your world now. Maybe. But they're also just not powerful at all. They're not intimidating or strong. They had to have a little doodad, a little plot device gizmo that's able to instantly sap their power when they get shot by it. They literally have plot convenience darts that they can fire out of a staff. And when it hits them, it steals their power back and they just become normal kids again. Because if it was to be like an actual toe-to-toe fight, they'd lose, and it wouldn't even be close. One of the villain's powers is she can whisper in your ear and make you do things, but she can't even do that half the time. She only demonstrates this working twice. The other, 3 times she uses it, a child overcomes it every time. A literal kid. It's supposed to showcase the kid being strong, but really it just showcases that god being weak as fuck, where she can't even, mind control a child. So, and that's all she does. She doesn't even demonstrate, super strength or anything. All she can do is whisper, tell you little secrets, and, inception you. And that's it. And then, the main villain, she can control elements. But all she uses that for is to make a box hit Shazam at one point. Or throw a amalgamation of concrete and traffic cones at Shazam once. And then put up a barrier twice. It's it's all so unbelievably underwhelming. They're just not good villains at all. From a writing perspective, a motive perspective, power perspective, they're not cool. There's a dragon in the movie, and even the dragon's not cool. The dragon's so fucking weak. They hype up the dragon like it's the eater of worlds and all that, but we don't see it do anything at all that demonstrates it being anything more than just this flying nuisance like a mosquito. But anyway, I'm focusing on that a little too much. This is at its core a movie for children. In fact, the entire auditorium was filled with families and their kids that would cheer anytime anything at all happened with like jingling keys. Like I know Shazam, the first one, is very much a family film, but this one is like 10x the childishness of that, from its jokes to its like actual plot and things that happen. This is very, very clearly geared towards a young audience. So that was a little disappointing. But even like the shit that happens in this film is so goofily non-important that even the main characters, for the most part, don't take it even remotely seriously for even a second. It just never feels like there's any real peril. And I absolutely fucking hate that since this has gone so far back in time into superhero movies, it has this big clusterfuck of bad CGI monsters that get spawned in. Literally like some Power Rangers shit. Just like these monsters that get spawned in, they're super shitty. They don't do anything. They like kind of move around a little bit. And I think they kill like 2 civilians. Kill, I'm using loosely. They throw them like 2 feet in the air and it's presumed that that civilian got hurt. It's just not very good at anything. I think the actors do a great job with the material that they're forced to work with. Like the acting I actually thought was even like improved. In the first film, it didn't really feel like Shazam the adult was the kid. It was 2 separate characters. Here, they feel a lot more in line, which is clearly what they're going for, and they definitely did a better job of that. But he's not really the main character in this one. Freddy's really like the heart of this film and where most of the emotion comes from. And Freddy's actor does a great job, honestly. Like, Freddy's a pretty decent character. Probably the best character in the movie, honestly. Like, he does get a bit annoying, but that's also one of his main traits. Overall, it just feels like this movie served no purpose. It felt like they made it because they felt forced to. I would imagine initially Black Adam was supposed to play a role in this because fucking obviously it's Shazam and Black Adam, but The Rock wasn't really willing to play ball. So instead, they had Black Adam be completely separate, which ended up tanking this film as well. So they had to fucking ham fist and cobble together this mess of a movie. And I'm calling it a mess, but it's not like it's fucking horrible or anything. It clearly knows that it's a movie for kids, and it leans into that. So I guess a lot of it's supposed to be something that you just give a pass to, but it's just not interesting at all. It really isn't. And I really hate a lot of the back and forth that happens, in particular in the middle act of this, where it's hard to talk about with spoilers, but there's a lot of back and forth with things getting taken and then getting taken back and then taken again and then taken back. It's just, I don't know. Not a lot of this movie worked for me. The movie was really at its best when it still had like elements of adventure, which were kind of in the beginning, where, for example, they went into a room that had a lot of doors leading to a lot of places. It was a cool little environment and a cool concept that wasn't really explored. But it was a cool idea, it was interesting. Then they go to a library with flying books and like this omniscient pen that can write down anything and answer any question you have. Those 2 things are cool, but you don't see a lot of that here. There's really just not a lot of magic in general, especially for something that involves a wizard and the powers being of magic origin and the villains having magic powers. It's crazy how not prominent the magic is in the film, which is a weird decision. But yeah, aside from a couple instances of a few scenes that I thought were done well, there just wasn't a whole lot I really liked about the movie. Plugging Shazam Fury of the Gods into the moist meter, I'm gonna have to give it a 40%. I really don't think it's horrible, and definitely I can see kids enjoying this movie. I heard kids enjoying this movie while at the theater. They were going fucking crazy anytime any kind of fucking fight or anything would happen, really. So I guess it might be a hit for a young audience, but I certainly wasn't in there pumping my fist at the film or anything. So That's really about it. Hey, huge congratulations to you, the viewer, because you're about to witness some history. You will always remember this moment as one of the most unenthusiastic moist meters and probably one of the shortest moist meters I've ever made. Aquaman 2, and the Lost Kingdom. More like Aquaman Snooze and the Lost Time, because this is truly a waste of time and it's very difficult to stay awake for this movie. I really don't have many positive things to say about this movie. I actually liked the first Aquaman, shockingly. Like, I went into it not expecting much, but ended up really enjoying the first Aquaman. So I was kind of expecting this one to be fun, though the initial screenings were labeled as disastrous or unreleasable, and everyone was just insulting it, so I stopped having high expectations. But I really didn't expect it to turn out like this. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not even the worst DC Universe movie I've seen. But it's one of the most boring. It is, I'm not kidding, hard to stay awake for it. I dozed off twice, and one of them was during like this big fight moment, because it's so clear nobody really tried at all. It was clear from like the very first 20 minutes worth of this film's opening. No one's heart was in this film at all. This was a movie that was pumped out just because it was part of the release schedule, so they were obligated to finish it and just shit this one out onto the market. So if no one in it cares, why the fuck am I gonna care? Plus, it doesn't have any real place in the DCU. This is the funeral for the DCU, and man, what a sad wet fart whimper it goes out on. As I understand it, they're doing an entirely new rebooted DCU, and this is the last remnant of the old guard, the ancient ways. And no one's going to remember this movie. Unless, of course, you're trying to remember some of the best sleep you ever got in a movie theater, because watching this is like taking NyQuil. It is visual sleep aid. So let's go ahead and get into it. First and foremost, the narrative is outrageously disjointed. The movie's 2 hours long, but it felt like it needed another hour and a half just to put together a plot that works, that fits, because it feels like it just constantly tried to speedrun things. Arthur, Aquaman, would teleport everywhere he needed to go. There was no real journey or anything. He's just like, I need to go find my brother. And then he's already there, like, beating some ass and freeing his brother. He's like, alright, good. It's like, well, how did you get there? Like, this man just has instant transmission like Goku here. There's just, things happen for the sake of plot convenience. Things just happen. And it's so unfulfilling, and especially because the performances from everyone are so flat. And it's not even the acting. I want to make it clear. I don't even think the acting is bad. It's the dialogue. The dialogue is so AI generated and bland that it makes all of the characters, no matter how hard they try, bland and boring. To give you an example, a truly devastating moment happens in the plot, one that's absolutely going to put tears in the eyes of everyone in the audience watching this. Something bad happens to Aquaman's family, and since this is a movie mainly about Aquaman's family, a lot of times it's spent like a buddy cop film with his brother. It's a movie about his family, and when this scene happens, I shit you not, I think it's five cuts, and what it is they go through all of Aquaman's closest friends and family, and they go, no! 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 Like, cutting between each one of them just saying no. It's fucking laughable. It is so silly. I really don't know why they would have put that in the final cut, and I think it's just scrambling to have put something out. This movie was apparently a victim of tons and tons of reshoots, and I really think you can feel that. For example, there were the rumors about Amber Heard's role in this film being cut down, and I definitely think that's the case. I don't think this is what the film was originally supposed to be. Since it's a movie about Aquaman's family, you would expect Amber Heard, who played a huge role in the first one, to have a big role in this one. But she doesn't. She's sidelined. They put her on the bench. I think she only has like 5 total scenes or something maybe, and I could probably count the amount of dialogue she has on one hand. She doesn't say or do anything in this film, even though it's all about Aquaman's family, so it's clear there were a lot of reshoots here in order to like get her role less, and then they didn't know how to fill in the blanks, so then they haphazardly threw other things together and probably had to do more reshoots, which led to like even more emotionless moments throughout. The whole thing just feels like a mess. And even visually, I thought this one would probably be good visually, even though DCU's got a reputation for having bad CGI. I thought the first Aquaman had a couple of wonky CGI moments, but overall is one of the better looking DCU movies. This one goes right back into the old ways, and there are some terrible CGI moments. And for some reason, half of the scenes just have the characters standing still. Like, they're not doing things half the time. I don't even know how they can make it look bad. They're just not doing anything, and sometimes it'll still just visually look like shit. It's so weird how this one does everything wrong that the first one did right. Even the villain that I thought was just a surefire slam dunk easy because the villain's so fucking cool, they fumbled. Manta isn't nearly as cool in this movie as he was in the first one. And in fact, Manta, like, they make him look as though it's not even Manta. They give him a storyline that, you know, he wants revenge and all of that. But then they overwrite it with their goofy mumbo-jumbo about, like, the ancient evil from back in the day using the orichalcum, which I will admit is a really cool name because it reminds me of Yu-Gi-Oh! With the seal of Orichalcos. But they should have just stuck with actual Manta being the main villain instead of being this puppet for the greater evil. Manta is so much more interesting than their stupid green wizard fishman. Like, no one cares about that guy, and even still, he doesn't do much. Like, they should have just had it be Manta as the main villain. He's so much cooler, and it would contrast so nicely with the theme of family, since Manta hates Aquaman for killing his father. That would be the perfect contrast to Aquaman's family dynamic and his family journey. And while that's kind of still present, it's executed so poorly because they have this completely disjointed narrative and they keep trying to shoehorn in this ancient evil with all this ancient technology, and somehow Manta has a whole army of people that know how to pilot all of it and use all of it for no reason that they ever explain. It's just such a mess. I'll go ahead and fish a few compliments out for the movie, though. There's a couple of scenes with Aquaman and his brother that I think were enjoyable. Like, just having them shoot the shit sometimes was pretty fun, mainly because Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson are just kind of charismatic, so when they're interacting with each other, it works. Like, that dynamic I thought was pretty decent, even though, again, all of that is just fucking blasted through super quickly. Like, you don't really see them bond, in my opinion. Like, they just happen to get to a point where all of a sudden they're tight, but they don't really earn that, especially given their history. They just end up there because they needed to for the plot. But when they are just, like, joking back and forth, it's pretty cute. Like, that's like, it's wholesome. And another nice thing I can say about the movie is there are a few good scenes. Like, their action is pretty enjoyable when it's there, and pretty much every good scene in the film has Manta in it. There are some standout moments, and Manta is the one that leads those. Now, plugging Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom in the Moist Meter, I'm gonna give it a 35%. It's hard to care about a movie when no one who made it seems to care. Like I said, this really seems like something that they just threw together because they had to. They had a contract they had to fulfill, so they did it. There's no real passion behind it. There's no real story they want to tell. Like, there's just really nothing worth seeing in this movie, which is a real shame because, like I said, I like the first one. I thought they did a lot of things right with the first one, and everything they set up there is completely not capitalized on here at all, even slightly. So yeah, that's about it. See ya. Today I had a rather perplexing question, and I turned to the only person in the world I can really trust, myself. So I decided to get the answer to the question: is the new Disney animated film Wish really as bad as everyone's saying it is? For the first time in a long time, this is one of the very few instances I can remember where a Disney film, specifically a Disney animated film, got blasted by both critics and audience alike. And I think a lot of you out there probably didn't even know Disney had a new animated film on the horizon, let alone out right now, because this movie, Wish, received less advertising than my secret TikTok account I made 3 years ago, It's Shade, where I was doing like awful fucking Doja Cat say-so dances and shit to see if I could organically grow a TikTok account wearing a mask. Spoiler alert, the answer was no. But this movie had no hype around it, legitimately no buzz, and unsurprisingly, it's not performing super well in the box office, but where it's really floundering is in the reception to it, where people are saying it's just genuinely not very good. Initially, I didn't have any plans of seeing this film, I just really wasn't interested in it. It didn't seem like a movie I'd really want to go put my ass in a theater for and watch. But after reading the reception to it and what people were saying about it, my curiosity was piqued. And all of you know that I'm drawn to bad movies like a fly to a pile of dog shit. I can't help myself. So, I went to see it last night, and I had to confirm for myself whether or not it really is the super stinker that it's made out to be. And before the intellectuals come in swarms to wiggle their finger and say, well, actually, Charles, this is a movie designed for children. It's ridiculous to try and critique it as an adult. Bah humbug. SpongeBob was designed for kids, but it's enjoyable for all ages. If you're making a quality product, even if its intended demographic is children, it should still be enjoyable to anyone of any age, if it's a good product. Disney used to understand this and be extremely good at it. Something like The Incredibles, I still think is an unbelievable masterpiece of a movie, even at 29 years old, and that movie is designed for a young demographic, but I still appreciate it as an adult because it's just a fucking good movie. I want to go into Wish a little bit here. I'm going to try and avoid spoilers. I wasn't really interested in seeing it, but after all of the reviews and everything, and somehow it got shredded by most people, which I would have never expected from like a pretty safe Disney animation, I got curious if it's actually bad. So right now it has, I think, the lowest Disney animation opening rating on Rotten Tomatoes ever or something. And I just saw it. And it's not bad, but I see why no one really likes it. It's really, really painfully generic. It is legitimately just a full-blown marketing campaign that could have been used as like a commercial, but stretched to a feature-length film. I don't understand why they'd even make it. It doesn't really make sense. They took every element of good Disney animations and like roped it into this haphazardly. And it has like the worst ending in any Disney animated movie I've seen in a minute. The ending is terrible. The ending is so bad. I just don't get why they even bothered with this. They didn't really have a story to tell. Like the movie's just over an hour, I think. Actually, how long is it? Let me check the runtime. It felt like it'd only been like 20 minutes and we'd reached the conclusion. Because it's just a speedrun of all the same Disney tropes we've seen a million fucking times. It's an hour 35. It literally felt like a 35-minute movie, which is nice. It didn't drag. But even spoiling it, it doesn't really do much. Basically, the concept of the film is fine. Like, the concept is interesting enough. There's a powerful sorcerer, and he takes people's wishes. He's made like this utopia kingdom. They give him his wishes to gives him their wishes for safekeeping, and then he'll occasionally grant them. And the big plot twist, well, it's not a big plot twist, it's actually established within the first 10 minutes of the film. Turns out he's not a great guy. Who could have seen it coming? He takes their wishes because he wants to ensure that they're not going to be a danger to his kingdom. So what he does is he takes all of these wishes and he only grants the safest ones. Like the most throwaway safe wishes. And Jeremy made a really interesting point that the film itself unintentionally serves as an allegory for modern Disney, where all of these fans have all of these wishes and expectations that they'd love to see Disney act on, and Disney doesn't. Instead, they just grant you the safest, most insignificant garbage content, like the safest shit. And I was like, damn, that's actually kind of profound. Like, this movie really is an allegory for how Disney handles what the fans want. Yeah, Jeremy Jans. Is it Johns or Jans? I really like his reviews. I think he does a good job. It's very concise, it's fun. But I never know if it's Jeremy Johns or Jans. Like, there's nothing objectively horrible about the film. It's just so derivative of every other Disney film ever made. You just get nothing out of it. Like, even the musical numbers are pretty uninspired. There's only one that stood out to me as being pretty good, and it's the second song in the film. Like, the second song is the only one that I was like, oh, that's kind of a banger. Everything else, I feel like no one would ever go out of their way to listen to ever again on purpose. They're just so bland. And every side character in this is completely forgettable that serves no purpose. And really, even the main character herself doesn't do anything. She does the most important thing, which is making a wish of her own on a star, which is why you get Luma here. But outside of that, she does nothing. The star does everything until the end of the movie, where it just completely blows its ass wide open with nonsense. There's been a trend on TikTok to compare it to older Disney movies and their music to show how generic it is. Oh, I believe it, because it is painfully generic. A lot of Disney fans on TikTok really don't like the music. Some of them even accuse Disney of using AI to make them. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I said, this feels so derivative of everything good from Disney movies of the past tried to like make something new out of. Like, it does feel like you would plug all of this into ChatGPT and have it spit out a script. It's uninspired. The jokes in it Like, I don't even know if you could classify them as jokes. They barely even try in that department. There's nothing. It has nothing. But the thing is, like, it's not a bad movie per se, I suppose. It's just so uninteresting, so forgettable, and just nothing. I just don't know why they'd even bother with it. No, it's just boring. Like, it's not fun bad or anything. It is just a boring movie. It has nothing to it. There's no meat on its bones. I'll talk about the ending real quick, I guess, because the ending really is like the most egregious, like, hey, let's just wrap this shit up and be done, okay? So basically what happens at the end... Okay, big spoiler warning if anyone gives a fuck. Huge spoiler warning. Sound the alarms. Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. Big spoilers. At the very end, it's the final showdown between the main character and the main bad guy. And he's this all-powerful sorcerer. Our main character, she doesn't have any powers of her own. Like I said, she herself doesn't really do anything aside from summon Luma, who does everything. It's character's not actually named Luma, it's Star, but it's basically like Rosa and Luma. And he captures Star, and everything looks lost, because it is. He is now all-powerful, all undefeatable, just this fucking monster now. And the way they defeat him is she starts singing a song. So then every citizen of the kingdom joins in the musical number, and he's already, like, bound them. And they all just start singing, and basically it's the power of their wishes was so great that Star broke free and he got caught in his own staff. Somehow. So they unionized. I mean, I guess. Yeah, kinda. But he's defeated through the power of song and everyone wanting to make wishes. But I don't, like, there's no reason that should have beat him at all. Like, it shouldn't, he should have just listened to that and been like, alright, can you stop wishing? This is fucking cringe. And then he just starts blasting them all again. Like, there's no reason it should have done shit to him. Doesn't the main character become a fairy godmother? Kind of, but until then she doesn't do anything, and even after that they don't show her doing anything. You actually watched this? Yeah, I was curious why it was getting shredded so much. I couldn't imagine it actually being that bad. And like I said, objectively it's not horrible, but it's just a complete waste of time. There's no reason to see this movie. It's just this amalgamation, this fucking chimera of Disney greatness from the past thrown in here really shittily. Disney's just tanking all over. Disney's had a rough year. In terms of, like, the reception to their work. Financially speaking, I don't know how they're faring, but the reception to a lot of the Disney work this year has been rough. We've all wasted money on something at some point in our lives. I know I'm guilty of that. I once spent $200 on a pocket trumpet that I never learned how to play, and then an additional, like, $150 on a theremin that I only tried to play a couple of times and never mastered. And these two items now just haunt my shelves in the closet. Big waste of money, and I do regret it. Of course, this is going to vary from person to person, but I can say with a high level of confidence you have not wasted as much money as Universal did for the rights to The Exorcist. 400 million clams in order to buy the rights for The Exorcist to make a trilogy out of it, and the first movie just dropped called Exorcist Believer. And I'm here to tell you after seeing it that this was the worst money ever spent. They blew their load with 400 mil and had nothing left over for writers, so they really relied on ChatGPT to scrap something together. This is laughable. This movie did not make me a believer in the future of this franchise. It made me a believer in true evil in Hollywood to allow this type of fucking terrible blemish to exist. This film is insulting to the legacy of The Exorcist. It is by far the most influential horror movie ever made, The Exorcist I'm speaking about, and to have this movie now coming out, even though I know the second and third Exorcist movies aren't exactly the best, this is so much worse. They could have spent $400 million for the rights to Jimmy Neutron and made a Hugh Neutron spinoff, and it probably would have been higher quality than this. And they had self-reflection on, like, the importance here of what they were making. Jason Blum of Blumhouse, who was a producer on this film, even said that it's the riskiest movie he's ever made. Just because it's so expensive, usually the bar to success on everything we do because it's inexpensive is incredibly low. For The Exorcist, it's high. And that's an understatement. It's extremely high. And man, did it fall flat on its fucking face. Now let's dive in. I'd like to explain why I think this movie's so bad and perhaps the biggest waste of money I've ever seen from a Hollywood gamble. So, I'll go ahead and tell you there's two compliments I can give this movie. I'll start off with the good here before getting you with the knuckle sandwich with the bad. The good. It has an interesting premise. It has a couple of interesting ideas. And best of all, it's not that long, so it ends pretty quickly. That's, of course, relatively speaking, it's about 2 hours long, but by modern movie standards, that's pretty quick these days. Everything wants to be like 2.5, 3 hours all of a sudden, so at least this is refreshing that it's only 2. Those are the only compliments I give it, and one of them is just that it ends, so you can leave and forget that you ever watched it. The biggest sin this movie commits, though, is being a fucking snooze fest. It is just unforgivably boring. If I didn't drink some gamer subs before going to the theater, I probably would have fallen asleep there trying to stay awake through this one. So I'm going to shout out Gamersups, because big W from Gamersups here. I had some titty milk, which is one of their flavors, before going. I know if I just say titty milk cold turkey like that, you won't know what I'm talking about. It's not real breast milk, that's just one of the flavors Gamersups offers, and it's my personal favorite one. I highly recommend Gamersups. I fucking love it. If you want to get some free samples, you can click the link in the description below. It's completely free, not even a shipping cost. Gamersups will just send out a bunch of samples for you to try, and you will most likely enjoy them. And yeah, if you also just want to use my code, it's code MOIST at gamersups.gg in order to get a discount on any of the items you might want to purchase. So big thanks to Gamersups. I am going to be getting into spoilers here, so this is your warning. I can't talk about what makes this movie so bad without some spoilers. Sorry in advance, but this is your warning. The film's plot. It follows a widower who has a daughter who really wants to meet her mother. And one day, after school, her and a friend go into the woods to perform a ritual to try and communicate with her mom. Obviously, things go south. It leads to a possession. And instead of one possession, one person being the victim of a demonic possession, it's both girls. They both become possessed. And I do think that's an interesting idea. Albeit, I don't think it's the most creative idea like some people are making it out to be. All it did was say, what if instead of one, there's two? What if we just... 2 of them! It's not exactly a galaxy brain scheme. It's just they added another character to be possessed. And then the other character, that's not the widower's daughter, is kind of an afterthought. In fact, her entire family is an afterthought. You probably won't even remember their names by the time the film's over, because they give them no time to develop, and they have nothing to do here except fucking endlessly whine. They're just these personality-less drones, like these forgettable side characters that pop up occasionally in Skyrim to say a few lines before going along their way all robotic, never to be seen again. That's that entire family. So it feels like, why even bother with 2 possessions if you're only going to focus on one of the families? It just doesn't make a ton of sense. I do think the dynamic of a double whammy possession could have worked well, and it does to a certain extent sometimes work decently here, if they had just given it more care. Like, there's definitely potential here that wasn't realized at all, really. But, like, there were a couple of decent moments with the 2 possessions, especially towards the end. I could see some glimmer of possibility with this idea. Aside from the lip syncing sometimes, it makes it very clear that it's dubbed. So if you've seen The Exorcist, if you've seen any fucking possession movie, you know how it goes. They'll have a demon voice coming out of the child's body, and in here, sometimes the lips don't match up with the words, so it really feels like a poorly dubbed Team 4-star moment sometimes. Like, how could you even let some of that slide? It's very obvious. Also, speaking of things without a purpose in this film, they brought back Ellen Burstyn from the original Exorcist, so it shows you that this is a direct sequel. And unfortunately, Ellen Burstyn has nothing to do here. They did her dirty. It's downright disrespectful because she has no role to play in this film. If you took her out, the entire film plays out exactly the same. Not a single iota of difference, whether she's here or not. It's purely as a, like, point at the screen cameo moment. Like, oh, I know her. That's it. Nothing else. It's pathetic, really. Like, it feels like it's misleading advertisement because she's in the trailer quite a bit, but she's not in the movie at all. So I already gave you the spoiler warning. All she does is serve as a brief side quest where Victor is trying everything to get his daughter back and out of the hands of the demon. He eventually finds her through, searching around. Victor then goes up to her, fills her in on the situation. We learn that she and her daughter Reagan aren't on good terms and she hasn't seen her daughter for a really long time. She agrees to help Victor and goes to one of the girls' houses, Catherine, and attempts to save her from the demonic presence. But in doing so, Catherine stabs both of her eyes. So now she's blind. And then that's it. We don't see her again until the very end. She exists solely in this film to get her eyes popped like bloody water balloons. And that's it. It just feels like such a waste to even have her here. This feels like a role they wrote before she had committed, so they wanted to make sure that if she said no to the role, it wouldn't change the outcome of the film, so they just gave her a throwaway role to play here, which is just, it's super dumb. It really is. But I wanted to point that out because that really stood out to me. There's just so many characters in here that actually don't serve a purpose. Like, I don't know why they're even bothering to put them in the film in the first place. But anyway, her eyes getting stabbed is one of the very few times that something even happens in this movie. I mentioned that it's boring, but I mean it is turbo boring at times. It had me wishing I was back in college listening to a professor lecture me about the Krebs cycle. That would have been more entertaining than some of these sections of the film. Now, the beginning of the film is spent trying to develop the characters a little bit. It's kind of like two different movies slammed together. The first half is trying to find where the girls went and what could have happened. The second half is then all of your generic horror movie tropes fucking crashed together haphazardly. And the first half I've seen get a lot of praise. You won't see it get any praise from me, though. I think everything it wanted to do in the first half was not done very well. Like, I think the intro is good, but then it doesn't really get you hooked on these character relationships. Victor and Angela only share brief exchange before Angela and Catherine go into the woods and go missing. And Catherine's family is basically just fucking ghosts here. Like, you barely even see them. And when you do, they do nothing but just go, ooh, and then you just, forget about them. But, like, there's not a whole lot of time spent developing these characters before they go missing. Now, of course, there's some development while they're looking for them and searching, and when they do eventually find them, trying to piece together what exactly happened. But I just don't really see where people are coming from when they're talking about how great this first half was. Because I just don't think it was done very well at all. It could have been done much better. But anyway, let's start talking about the worst parts of the film, and that's its attempt at horror. I say attempt because I think it just fails completely at delivering anything that even resembles horror. It tries to rely on jump scares, but doesn't know how to do them. It's like they don't know what a jump scare is. So what'll be happening is characters will be having just a normal conversation or normal things happening, and then all of a sudden it'll just flash a couple of images at you like you're playing the Scary Maze game from back in 2009 or whatever. Like, they'll just be talking, and then all of a sudden, scary image. Ooh, look at this creepy figure, and here's kind of a loud noise. But they were mid-conversation. It's not like a jump scare. They were actively talking, and now all of a sudden there's just like a weird thing on screen and a louder noise. That doesn't like startle anybody. Like, they weren't well-executed jump scares, and executing a jump scare is the easiest thing in the world. Just go silent, and then bang, huge noise, crash fucking 10 trash cans together with this huge noise and the creepy face or something. But they don't even do that. They just randomly, I guess maybe bad editing is to blame, but randomly just start putting a couple of flash creepy images with like a slightly louder sound. So the jump scares don't even work, and that's the only thing it ever really does for horror. The suspense doesn't exist in this movie. There's no such thing. Like I said, I do think the child actresses do a decent job of like looking creepy and like moving around creepy occasionally, but even that isn't utilized very much because they're very quickly bound to chairs and then spend like 30-35 minutes being bound to chairs as people recite prayers around them. I'll get to that in a moment though. But yeah, I really don't know what people would find scary about this. And that's not just coming from like, oh, I'm a tough man, look at my machismo, I don't get scared at horror movies. I just really don't think they even attempted anything here, unless you were just really, disturbed by the sound of a heavily filtered creepy sounding voice, I suppose. But like, I'll give you another example of something they tried to do that I think was supposed to be scary. Victor's brushing his teeth and the lights keep flickering. Literally like the scene out of SpongeBob with the hash-slinging slasher, and they turn around and it's Nosferatu. That exact scene happens in here. Victor's brushing his teeth, the lights are flickering, he's looking up, the lights keep flickering, he turns around, and it's just Angela flicking the light switch on and off, and he's like, hey, cut that out, you know, let's go back over here. And then he goes back to it, and the lights start flickering again, and then she just goes, what did you say? And like, that's the whole scary scene. It's like, what the fuck was that? Like, that was lame, super lame. And then there's another scene where she like attacks Victor, but it's not even like startling or a jump scare. She like comes up behind him and like attacks him super quickly, and then that's it, and he's fine. And then she just closes the door. Like, it's all just, I don't know. It feels like they didn't know what they were doing, so they just went in on filming days and improvised. I have no explanation for it because it's like they didn't even try. Also, this isn't exclusive to this movie, but I am so fucking tired of the trope that when you're dealing with a possession, all you need to do is speak sternly to it to get it out. So when Ellen does actually go and confront Catherine for a moment, her strategy is, hey, get out of there. Hey, quit goofing around. That body belongs to that child, Catherine, not you. Get out of there. Scram. Get out of town. And the demon's like, no, like struggling around and like falling and flopping like a fish out of water. It's like, what? Why does that work? Like, why is this doing anything at all? Unless it was also pranking her. But even still, that's so silly. It's so stupid. Like, she's not doing anything besides just speaking to it like a disappointed parent. Like, oh, come on now. Quit with this nonsense. Hey, come on. Like, it's just, the way that demons are fought in possession films, I think is just the goofiest shit ever. They've got to find other things to do to fight demonic possessions. Like just saying its name and it like vanishing and like screaming, it said my name! The human said my name! And then like burns back to hell is stupid. And then just them saying, hey, the Lord doesn't like what you're doing there, so get out of there. It's like, no! It sucks. It sucks. And I just needed to point that out. So let's just, I don't even know why I'm getting so into the weeds here. The movie just sucks. But let's just talk about the end here. Eventually, they tie both of the girls to some chairs and they're trying to perform a ritual with like a ton of different prayers, a ton of different belief systems that they're all throwing their way to try and get the demons to leave. Eventually, it's not working. So what ends up happening is a very powerful pastor comes in and he touches both their heads and he's like, Christ says, get out of there. And the demons are like, no. It's like everyone's getting really optimistic because it's finally working. They're going to get their daughters back. But then the daughters snap his neck with like telekinesis. So he dies. It's the only death in the film. And it was a pretty gruesome death. I didn't expect that. So that one actually caught me off guard. That was a pretty decent moment, actually. And then they never do that again. They just go back to just sitting there laughing. Like, well, not even laughing. Like, there's a scene where they're getting some, like, water tossed on them, and they're, like, screaming in agony, and, like, there's a burning sound, but they're totally still fine. And they're just... My big problem here is the demon at no point was in any danger of actually getting exorcised at all. But, for some reason, they kept pretending like they were getting somewhere. And then eventually, the demon says, you must make a choice. One of these girls will live, and one of them dies. You choose. Why? You could just have both of them because they have done nothing to actively stop you. Like they have not been able to effectively fight you. So why all of a sudden would you give up one of the girls? It didn't compute. But not only that, I'll fast forward. That was the big gamble, the big moment like, oh no, we're going to have to make a choice. And it ties into something that happened in the intro of the movie where Victor had to make a very hard choice. That I won't spoil because it's the biggest twist of the film. But anyway, it's a choice. Like, oh, we have to choose one. I can't choose. No, it's not right. Well, we can't choose between our daughters. But then eventually, the whiny dad of Catherine says, I choose Catherine. So then Angela is about to, supposedly die. She eventually like levitates and then pukes onto the ceiling, falls, and we think she's dead. But then what ends up happening is Catherine dies instead, and now Angela is no longer possessed. Well, why? So the demon just let itself get killed? Like, the demon just said, I'm out, bye? He's just like, alright, this was a fun game. See you guys. I had a good time playing. Like, why? It doesn't make sense. Why would he do that? And why did he keep letting himself get caught? All the demon does is talk shit. The demon's entire purpose here is just to be an annoyance, a nuisance, flicking lights on and off, filling up the bathtub with dirty water, saying some profanity here and there. That's it. Like, it's just a prankster. It doesn't even do anything. It's not even, like, that evil. It only defended itself when the pastor was about to, like, get rid of it, so then it killed the guy. Other than that, it just kind of, like, chills out. Well, and I guess when it stabbed the lady's eyes. But aside from those two instances, all it is just a bother. An annoyance. And now all of a sudden, it's like, it's had its fun, so it left. Even though they have done nothing to actually get rid of it, or actually make it want to leave. It just did. For no reason. It was so unearned, it was so unsatisfying, so unfulfilling, and so lame. Like, I don't even know how they're supposed to turn this into a trilogy. How? The only thing I could see them trying to do is be like, oh, Angela actually is still possessed. He's just hiding himself better now. And that, of course, is probably the direction it's going to go, which is the laziest direction, but the only one it can go. There's no other options left for it, so they've already spent $400 million on this. They're going to fucking make a sequel, and then a sequel after that one. It's going to be a trilogy. I feel like there's no way they pump the brakes on it, even though this is flopped. They're going to have to because they're already so deep in the hole. I just don't know how they even try to salvage it. I don't see how. This was terrible. It was actually terrible. Laughable, even. People were giggling at this movie. It's not good. Like, I can't believe they spent $400 on the most iconic franchise rights and blew it this badly. It's just, I don't know. It's crazy to me. But I wanted to talk about this because I think this is probably the biggest waste of money I've ever seen in Hollywood. So that's pretty impressive. That's about it. See ya.